Welcome to Money Isn't Everything. I'm Mary Wisniewski, Cornerstone Advisors, editor-at-large, and host of the show that explores early-stage ideas that could, if not already, shake up financial services. Today on the show is Ben Hopf. He's the founder and CEO of Atticus, a young fintech firm that's built an estate settlement and inheritance platform. We chat about a lot of interesting things, including the idea of gifting financial services products like Atticus. And we also explore how inheritance could change as Gen Z ages and the thinking that goes into designing an app that aims to have users need the product less. As Ben said, we don't want someone hanging out here. We want them to get it done so they can move on with their life. Here's our combo. Ben, welcome to Money Isn't Everything. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks, Mary. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I just wanted to get right into it. I have a big smile on my face, but we're about to take it to a darker place immediately because of what you're building, but which is a heavy subject, but it's something everyone encounters when, what to do when someone dies. In your case, like guiding individuals through the money process. And I'm just really curious of how you entered this world or decided, hey, this is what I want to, help build a solution for.
It's a great question. And yeah, it can get dark. It can feel heavy. I've actually had engineers and past developers turn down opportunities to join us because they were thinking, oh, this is going to be kind of emotionally difficult to build in this space. But I would say it's interesting across our team. We really try to have an uplifting view on it and it being something that's beautiful. It does happen to everybody. And it's kind of not culturally normal to talk about it across families, which is one of the big problems across the industry, whether it's fintech or even the legal industry, and normalizing some of these conversations. But it can be something that's very beautiful, and that's the way we try to approach it and try to make it feel like that for families, because they've got so much on their plate already as they're going through things emotionally. The biggest thing we could do is try to take off some of the logistical and administrative burdens. But to jump back to your question, how I got into it. I fell into a track on the estate settlement side through my background and my education, actually through college, as trust and wealth management. So I went to a school that has the only undergraduate program in the country for trust and wealth management. It's taught through law professors at the law school, and it literally puts out 75 to 85 students per year that go on to be trust officers for the private banks and the trust companies across the country. It's a really niche program. It's really, really cool. It's an insight into kind of how wealth is acquired and how it passes, both from the legalistic sense in terms of how to structure things, tax avoidance, but also in the sense of how do you pass that down philanthropically or even to other family members and kind of steward the same cultural values that the matriarch, patriarch kind of kept as they acquired that, speaking obviously towards high net worth individuals. But I went into a program through school for that and was working for a smaller boutique family wealth office for a number of years, then recruited out to build out some of the generational transfer offerings for Bank of America, U.S. Trust out in San Diego, where most of their business was high retail investment and a lot of brokerage, a lot of lending, and they wanted some more of the trust assets. So I did that and then saw an opportunity to fall into the estate settlement side and build out some software. And so, yeah, long story short, that's kind of how I fell into this side.
Well, Ben, you didn't start with your Q&A that's on your website that you were in the watermelon picking business.
Those were my first jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
how dare you not start with that?
I know, right? Well, it's funny. So my mom's side of the family grew up doing watermelons. My grandfather had a brokerage where they would buy watermelons from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, as the season would progress, and then ultimately pick their own watermelons in North Carolina and then Virginia. But we would sort them out in a warehouse and sell them brokerage style to the grocery stores. So when you walk into a grocery store and you see the big cardboard box with all the watermelons in it, for many years there, that's what I was doing, is touching those and throwing them. Spent many summers throwing watermelons in hot North Carolina summers. And I tell you what, that will teach someone young to study hard and to work hard and go get a different job so you're not doing it for 40 years. But yeah, a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, and it has a dreamy quality to it as an outsider. I mean, I've picked strawberries for jam for the family, but that was like a one day sort of situation. Ben, you started this chat by talking about like the beautiful side of this too. And I think that's really important because it's something I'm noticing with like banks, credit unions, and fintech. It's usually focused on like the, more of the, oh, retirement, you're walking down the beach sort of thing, and that's the future. But you're drilling into something else. And you're right, like the cultural norm is not like to embrace or think about death so much, or and so you're building a product that it's engaging in the darker subject, and as you said, beautiful subject. And I remember, I think this is what maybe brought us together a bit ago, and I saw that the blog was still up, was like your funeral playlist, as like, hey, what are your songs? So yeah, let's talk about that, like how you create content to be like, hey, this is not just like darkness, it's also a celebration.
I think a lot of people have different approaches on it, and it's really interesting the timing in which you catch those conversations. And so a conversation between you and I now, or the viewers who are listening that don't have this going on, versus those that maybe just lost a loved one, and what their sensitivity is to it. And you would think that the ones that just lost somebody would be the least likely to want to speak towards this, or even have the cheerfulness of like, hey, I've got a song recommendation. But it turns out that like when I'm in conversations, a lot of times it's just a call with a bank partner, or even just a call with some of our customers or leads, that they're saying, hey, I saw that article, for instance, and I'd love to add something to it. So that list is backpiled by a lot of recommendations from people that we actually engage with, which is really cool to see. But yeah, I think everybody approaches it differently. Some people have plans, some people have wills, some people don't. In the will, some people specify like the way they want their funeral to go. Some people are like, I don't care, give me a Viking funeral, set me out at sea and hit me with a torch and arrow, and like, I'm gone, don't worry about it. And the others are like, no, I really want to have this scripted kind of experience, and this is what I want, whether it's the music, or this is how large I want it, this is the gathering, this is that I want from a conversation standpoint, this is what I want it to feel like. So it does vary a lot.
And I saw, and I think this is really striking, is that you can gift Atticus to someone. And then it got me thinking, like, oh, gifting a financial related product is a very interesting idea. So, A, do people do that? And B, like, what made you try this out?
The way we started with that, I think, was from a conversation with a client or the customer. I never know what to call them. In the tech space, we call them users. In the banking world, a user. In the trust world, particularly, like when you're talking high net worth and trust management, you're talking about clients that are users. It's like all of a sudden spendthrifts, or they've got some addictions and abuse. And so it's funny from a conversation standpoint. So we'll call them clients. But we were talking to a customer, and they were saying, I've got so many flowers sitting around my house, or that they did at the time, and that it felt beautiful, it felt loving. But then all of a sudden there was this wave of grief that came, 2 weeks after the passing, when all of the flowers started to wilt and die. Mm-hmm. And it made them realize, like, all of a sudden, a second time, how empty the house is, or just a second wave of the grief of loss and of death. And it was from that conversation, they said, I wish I'd had less flowers. Everybody didn't know what to do. They wanted to bring me something. What I really need is help now. Everybody was there at the funeral. Everybody held my hand as we were going through this process, but no one was there for me afterwards when the real stuff happened. Whether there was a bill that needed to be paid, an account they couldn't access because their name wasn't on it, things of that nature. And they didn't really have anyone to speak to. There was no centralized advisor. There was no attorney that could step in and do some of this. The life insurance was in a different place, and they really needed help from someone just to kind of walk them through it. And that was kind of the novel concept towards like, can this be a gift? Can loved ones gift this to each other? And absolutely. And so we do see that now. So we enabled that as kind of an offering. And a lot of times what we see for that usage is that prior customers of ours will come back and will gift that to a friend or a family member in need when they hear of someone that's passed away, because of the value they got from our product and they know about it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your product, because it feels like a guide, and through a process. Like, how long is? I know it changes. It depends on like all the legalities, and do you have a will? Do you not? As you already like hinted toward, but like, what is the range here? Is it like a year plus?
It can be. I mean, to speak towards averages, I would say on average it's like 8 to 12 months. There are certain legal things that time gate the process. Mm-hmm. So, as an example, one of the big things is that, and it makes sense, like from a government and legal standpoint, is that you want to time gate it so that an estate doesn't close too quickly, so that any potential creditors of the estate have the ability to get assets from it. So let's say that, I don't know, an aunt or an uncle like is out there. It's not a parent, but they're there. They had some plumbing work done or electrical work done, and then they passed. How does the plumber, how does the electrical contractor learn of the passing? How do they submit a claim? How do they get money from that estate so that they're not just out? And so from a legal standpoint, there's time gating where you can't start the process towards a certain amount of days, typically like 30 days after the date of death. And then you can't close from a statute of limitations standpoint till it varies 3.5, 4.5, 6 months based upon the types of assets or the state that they're living in. But beyond that, there's a lot of logistical things like closing the accounts and just tidying up the loose ends. We did a big study a while back, and on average, executors were spending around 500 hours working to get through this process. And so whether that's in a few months or over the course of a year, it varies. It gets more complicated when you've got multiple beneficiaries. Adult children are still very much children. Siblings that have grown up are still very much, children when their parents pass. And it becomes a lot of arguments, not always, negative and contentious sometimes. And you have litigation or mediation with legal parties. But you also have disagreement due to the emotional sense of assets and the connections that each of the beneficiaries might have. So let's say it's a family farm. Let's say it's the matriarch's house that, the second and third generation have come and done Christmas at for the last 30 years. How are you going to sell that house? Half the family wants to keep it. The other half doesn't. The logistical side of it, if you're going to keep it, who's going to pay for it? And property taxes and maintenance and cutting the grass. Like there's all sorts of decisions. And when you're emotional, there could be a lot of disagreements. And so that will slow the process down. Our goal at Atticus is to automate as much as possible, increase transparency, decrease the cost, decrease the amount of time spent having some of these conversations. We could step in with tech and facilitate, a best means resolution. But a lot of times it really is just dependent upon the family taking the time to marinate on the ideas. What are their options? Learn what has to happen from a logistical standpoint, and then ultimately make those decisions and act upon it.
Have you found, are you using Gen AI in your product design, or do you see, yes?
Yeah, AI is, it's fascinating. It's changing daily. That's a topic that, I don't know, I could spend hours thinking through and talking through. We are using it. I think there's huge potential for it to be used more. We were slow to adopt on some of this because a lot of the early AI, in my opinion, was really, like you said, Gen AI, so generative, like content, creating content. And what you saw with a lot of founders or a lot of startups was, let's go blast a lot of SEO articles and things of that sense. We've always taken the approach of like wanting our users to need our product less or read our content less. A lot of our team came from TurboTax, and it was a very similar mindset there. It's different than like building an app like Instagram where you're trying to increase time in app, how many daily active users, monthly active users. TurboTax is like this, the more simple it is, the more adoption you're going to get. And the more simple it is, the less you need it, right? You might have 10,000 screens, but like, let's hope it only takes 5 or 10 minutes to get through the tax filing process. And so it's the same kind of connection with us. How do we decrease the amount of time that a user needs to engage with our platform? So from a generative standpoint, we've never been of the mindset of like, let's just create more content. Let's try to reduce a lot of that. We'll use Gen AI conversationally to try to like soften the tone on certain things or come up with a talk speak to accelerate some of our copywriting. More so, I'm excited for the deeper LLM kind of things that are happening now around MCPs or agent to agent. All these agentic workflows where we can actually start stitching systems together to achieve different things. So as an example, maybe you're an executor and you need to contact Time Warner Cable to close, a relative's account. There's companies out there, and not to pick on any individual, companies out there aren't really incentivized to invest money into optimizing the experience of offloading customers. And so it gravitates towards being difficult and frictional. How do you close an account? What are the paperwork you need to submit? How do I know that Mary is authorized to close Joan's account when I can't talk to Joan? How do I know this is a legitimate death certificate? How do I know this is a legitimate paper? How do we go through that process? And so again, like when you speak back towards why this takes a long time, you're having to do this across multiple companies. how do we automate some of that? I see potential for that very much leaning in towards agentic systems and workflows that can automate it. You've got a burden of authorization and who is the user and how do you authorize that? So we get really excited on that side of it, proving out who the executor is. You're obviously very familiar with KYC, know your customer. From the banking world, that's ingrained upon me. We've come out with something similar, which we call it KYE, know your executor. And so we'll actually go through a verification process where we will ask our customers for these different steps to verify who they are. And the ultimate being really, the signed form that you need back from the government, from the court system saying, yes, Mary's authorized to act over this estate. And that's also, by the way, a form that we help surface for the user. So as a customer comes, the typical life cycle is someone passes away, they have a funeral, everything happens. And then like 30 days later, all of a sudden there's a mortgage to pay or rent to pay. And they're like, well, I don't want to pay it. And siblings are like, I don't want to pay it. It's like, how do we get access to the money to pay it? That starts the whole flow of like, what do we need to do? We haven't thought about this yet. How do we put our hands around the assets, the accounts, the estate, and start acting? And you go down to the local bank and the bank's going to say, I have no clue. I heard the private bank come into the retail bank and educate us towards some of these topics, but it's over my head. I'm not sure. I just know I can't touch it. Good luck. And so that's really where we step in. We help provide the right forms. How do we get you authorized to act? And then we verify that. That's where I get really excited from an AI standpoint, is that once somebody has been verified, how do we kick into some agents and some workflows that will start to do some of that, whether it's generate a letter to Time Warner for you so that you're not writing it, or to go connect to obituaries.com and snip some of the information and create one for you. Things of that nature that they can really just kind of be embedded into creating efficiencies.
Yeah, Ben, that's so interesting because I think banks and credit unions and fintech they have different approaches to this, right? Some of them actually do want people to like linger into their app, even if it's just to like handle their transactions. So the fact that you're designing for like, get out of here, make it easy during this unusually stressful time. I'm projecting, but I have to think that's often the case. But like, what's like a design trick or something that you do to be like, hey, we want this. We don't want someone hanging out here. We want them to get it done so they can move on with their life.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is like designed towards progress. So throughout our experience, we have a very visual sense of like what's next. What do you need to focus on next? We have like nearly infinite like reading where you can go and learn and educate. But it's our theory that like you don't really want to become an expert on this. You just want to get through the process. So what is next? And so we have full details for everybody. But our goal is to always shrink that down into the most minimal amount of reading. We started actually as a mobile app, and now we're much heavier desktop usage and kind of web platform. A lot of that being because of COVID, right? We started with the mobile app because a lot of the tooling was like, I'm on the go. I'm at the relative's house. I'm taking photos of the assets that we need to be split up across beneficiaries. I'm doing this on the fly. COVID happened. We all get locked down. We're in front of our devices. And so I'm not on the run quite as much. Also, like as we got deeper into some of our building, a lot of the forms capabilities and like actually doing the work, spreadsheets, it just renders a lot better on a larger screen. But even still, we've retained that sense of visual design towards everything that we write should have like a summary snippet. And then you can expand for the full details if you would like. Or even like taking them out of our platform where we're sending them the emails to their inbox saying, hey, this is next. Click the button and we'll go do it. And then we authorize who the user is through those links without them having to log in just to kick to somewhere else. How do we kind of accelerate them towards the path of what they need to get to? And it might not be the typical experience of walking through just a software, app step by step. It's kind of spread out at different places.
Ben, you mentioned tone and like using Gen AI maybe for tone, but yeah, tell me about that. What tone do you like Atticus to take? And yeah, how do you even think about like the structure of your sentence within the app?
We take a warm kind of, I think we have some from talk speak towards what this actually is from a marketing standpoint. It's like the empathetic advisor is what we call it, but it's a warm tone. We aren't nonchalant. We don't joke about death. We're not insensitive, but we're also not overly empathetic towards the emotional side of it. Like we're not here to be your emotional counselor. Like we're not trained in that. We don't do it. And there's a time and a place and a need for it. But there's also a time and a place and need for like, you've got to you've got to act. There's a legal forcing function of something that needs to be done. What is it? How do you do it? How do we help you through that? We take the approach of we're going to help with everything else so that you can focus on the emotional side of grief, loss, relationships, meaning of life, like all of that side. We're just going to take everything else off your plate and help advise upon how do you get access to the accounts? How do you distribute them? What are the right forms? Here's the clerk that you need to go to. You have to show up physically. You can't do this remotely, like all of those different things, and accelerate that process. So I'd say from a tone standpoint, we're kind of matter of fact and straightforward. There is an embedded element of literacy that is underestimated with this. And like the statistics of the American adults and the average American adults who read at like a certain grade level, I don't know, 5th grade level, maybe, I don't know what it is.
That sounds right.
But it's something like that, which is kind of mind blowing. But then again, I've got a 2nd grader who's like reading chapter books now. So maybe 5th grade, like that does make sense. I'm probably like in 1st grade. But, so there's like the literacy side of like competence, but you add financial literacy on top of it, which all of your viewers would get. Banks have talked about this for a long time. How do you democratize like education towards savviness of financial terms and investing? And then like fiduciary and legal stuff, which like most people don't even know the word fiduciary other than like, the ads they might see on CNBC talking about we're like a licensed fiduciary, we have to act in your best interest. But like these words, the amount of times that I'm talking to a customer on a call and they're like, oh yeah, I think I'm the executor. And I'm like, I don't want to stop you, but you're not the executor, you're the executor.
Yeah.
Like the executor is like, no, like this, but like they don't know what these words are. And so we're pretty like matter of fact with our voice and tone, but we also have to take the time to really explain and educate what these things are. What's an executrix? It's the same as an executor, but for a female. There's actually a word for it. Like,
oh, I didn't know
there's
that.
all these different things. It's the testate, intestate. Like the words get super bizarre. It's old English. And, how do we kind of educate the average user towards what those things are so that they don't feel intimidated when they show up in court or in conversations with an attorney or a financial advisor that's kind of throwing things around to make them think that they need more help than they do. So how do we kind of empower through that? And I think that the confidence and the respect and relationship we build with our customers through that and empowering them to be educated, I think circumvents any of the emotional side that we just kind of skip on. And they leapfrog right into action. And it really helps streamline the process.
Yeah, I can see the case for that. And another big thread that financial institutions care a lot about is the great wealth transfer, which is always, I feel like, in the sidebars of conferences and whatnot. But I guess this is going to be a broad question for you, but like, how do you interpret it? Or like, as this happens more and more for Gen X, millennials inheriting, whatever they're inheriting or not, I mean, does anything change then, decades past from your point of view or the way that you're creating your product?
I think a lot changes. I think this would be an interesting conversation in 3 to 4 years, even. I mean, this is like beyond what I'm doing for work, but like the whole world seems like it's changing to me right now. Like a lot happened in 2020, 2021, and it's just like accelerated from there. AI, like everything's just kind of being rewritten. All of software is being rewritten, business structures, generationally, like what we see. The talk was all millennials and millennials are set to inherit it. It's all Gen Z now. And like when you look at the typical Gen Z mindset and the way that they approach life, it's entirely different. They're creating businesses. It's all like Web3, like just digital natives that are out there using these tools, whether it's AI, like all of the no-code platforms. Everybody is tinkering with things like Windsurf and Cursor, like creating apps and spinning things up. When you look at the great wealth transfer, a lot of the assets over I would say the last 20 years have shifted from the traditional assets of like investments and liquid assets, which I'm going to call liquid assets in our case, even stocks and bonds, which is not like liquid cash, like an investor would call it, but it's liquid in the sense that it's not a house, it's not real estate, it's not a business. But when you look at that great wealth transfer, it's not just financial assets, it's everything. And so we actually did a deep dive and worked with the Federal Reserve to come up with some data. I can share the report to you in terms of like demystifying some of that great wealth transfer, because a lot of financial advisors hear that and they see it and they're like, oh, this money's moving. It's not just like liquid money, it's businesses. And so a lot of the conversations that we're having or that we're walking through with our clients, our customers, should I keep the business that my uncle had? should I keep the business that my son created that's an internet business that he passed, and the parent saying, what do I do with this? Obviously, there's crypto, there's all sorts of assets that are there. So I do think a lot changes. All of it needs advice. And I think that the structure around wealth management is changing as well. Obviously with crypto, but it's so much more than stocks and bonds now. It's the diversified portfolio, including retail, the amount of millennials that have gone out, bought homes and spun up Airbnb businesses where they're managing 6 to 8 houses, and like that's their living, like that's their income that's coming through, and that is a business that will get transferred. So do relatives want to keep that or not? So it's really interesting to kind of see the way that inheritors are viewing the assets and their receptiveness to retain those and look at those as wealth construction resource tools during their life.
Yeah, no, that will be really curious to follow. So I'm glad you brought that up. And there is one segment in the show, and I guess I've saved it for the end, but it's called That's What You Said. And you were quoted as saying, financial wellness is about balance. And so the article was saying that you helped, I guess it was a dinner maybe, and you were talking about how it's important to be active, seeking opportunities, making money, but also like creating your life. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting because here you are, an entrepreneur, and I do know like, oh, it's really hard to balance things as an entrepreneur. So I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about your philosophy on, doing your life, but also building a business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's funny you brought that up. I remember that dinner. That was a good steak at that dinner. I mean, I want to say all these things about creating balance, and it's probably right. I haven't figured anything out. I'm far from an expert on life. Every night you go to bed and you're like, man, these are the things I did wrong, and how can I get better?
What a great way to go to sleep, Ben.
I know. Well, it just happens. And like,
yeah, I know.
It just happens. I'm a tinkerer. I'm a builder. I'm a founder. I'm always thinking, how do I optimize? I haven't found balance. I think that the days of balance, died with internet. I've got 2 young kids. I try to raise them like it's the 80s, man. It's like no helmet, build a ramp, take your bike off of it, no technology. Like we just don't do that stuff. It's like, go, swing on vines out in the tree, like be young, be healthy, like do all those things. But, I think that the balance is really about finding the things that you care about and spending the time in it and exposing your circle that's around you, whether it's friends, whether it's family. How do you expose them to it? So, my daughter's 6, but like, hey, this is Figma. This is what UX UI design is. Like, so yeah, we can be drawing these cartoons, but let me show you how this works in Figma and like design these things. And so I've got kids that are interested in prototyping on that, or my son who's 8 looking at like coding and going through like a code school already at 8. Like, how do you kind of introduce them to these things? And I'm learning at the same time. And so the balance is really about how do you kind of create the exposure to those things, as opposed to like setting aside these hours to do this and these hours at home. I think it's just it's all kind of integrated.
Yeah, no, that's kind of lovely to think about it that way. And I'm sure chaotic at times, at a lot of
Definitely
times.
Can be.
Ben, for people who might want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? How should they interact to find Atticus?
Yeah, you can grab me on LinkedIn, Ben Hopf. Shoot me an email, ben@atticus.biz. Shoot me a text, 252-917-4779. I'm out there. Not too hard to find, but give me a shout anytime. Love to talk.
Ben, one last question for you, but before I ask it, anything else you wanted to bring up on trends, lessons, inheritance?
There's a really cool study that we did. I'll link it to you so you can send it to the audience. But
okay, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, when we looked at inheritance, across the industry, you can get a lot of financial advisors. You kind of start, for those who are listening, not even looking, you're doing the hands like, oh, I'm excited, like greedy. There's a lot they get excited around, like, oh, you're about to inherit money. All of a sudden, like all of the financial advisors show up. And so we're really big towards like, there's a huge opportunity to innovate on this space. There's no fintech that's really like nailed inheritance. Like I'd love to be a part of that, but it starts with providing meaningful value upstream. So how do we help? How do we build trust during the process? But one of the things that's really cool is that we did that study and we looked at the actual assets that were being inherited, and that forced us to like segment the demographics of inheritance and who was receiving it and who's set to receive it, how those trends have changed. And by and large, the biggest indicator of a change in inheritance over the past 50 to 100 years was a change in education. And so we all drove down towards, like, as we were looking at like what's the average inheritance, what are the average inheritance sizes, the most common types of inheritance, like assets that are passed down. By and large, like the coolest trend that we saw was education. To bring it all full circle, we were talking about death, and is death dark and heavy, and how is it more beautiful? There's a huge amount of inheritance that passes that people don't even really call inheritance or realize it is when generationally you pass down education. And that happens in the home, that happens in the community. Obviously, it happens in the school system and higher education of going and getting learned up. As we continue to see the world evolve, like I think that the 4-year college degree, not that it means less and less, but like the amount of doers who are out there, DIY everything, whether it's coding, whether it's designing, whether it's the plumbers, the contractors, like a huge push back into some of these trades and industries that can provide huge, great livings, scalable businesses within them. It's really cool to see how education as a society has paid into just the bettering of the entire society and the economy, families, just kind of all of it. So yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that question. It's a really cool trend. I'll send you more information on it so you can read it. But I just think that like demystifying the fact that like passing down education and really should be considered inheritance, because it's such a massive indicator towards financial success, financial balance across the next generation's lifetime. That's a conversation that needs to be had just as much as normalizing, hey, at some point I'm going to pass away. I don't want to leave a mess. Here's everything so that when I do pass, it's prepared and it's not a burden to you.
Way to bring us full circle. I'm really appreciative of that. And that is a beautiful thing to think about as inheritance. Certainly feels much more meaningful than here's money. But last question for you. What is the image on your phone's lock screen?
Oh, man. Let me see.
I've stumped him, finally. He's looking
There you go. Surfing. It's surfing.
Oh, yeah.
Picture of me surfing a wave of, yeah.
Oh, cool. I've surfed exactly like 3 times, and I wouldn't call any of them notable. Other than I had fun.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, thanks so much for being on Monies and Everything. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about death and what to do about money.
Likewise. I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Okay, so one thing that stood out to me is that death isn't just about, darkness. It's also a celebration, as evidenced by Funeral Playlist. And 2 weeks from now, we have Pipe's Amy Lowe on to talk about small business and fintech. See you then.